Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table is sitting our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and we are celebrating Dub Day here in the Broncos podcast studio. The Broncos moved to the number one seed in the AFC after winning their 10th straight game and sweeping the Raiders on the road. Standing at 11-2, they now control their own destiny, and it's Denver's most wins in a season since 2015, which is always exciting to see, just the connection to 2015. You've seen it kind of all season. But now that the Broncos have improved to 11-2, yesterday's win was more important for a lot of things. We talked about that on the preview show, about the tie-breaking situation, things like that. But what were your just initial thoughts? Because I know for me, it was one of those games where I was just happy that the way that they started fast, and they just kind of never let up. They didn't trail in this game, and they really took care of business on the road against the Raiders.
Yeah, I think the first thing that stands out is it wasn't a nail-biter, right? For the first time in a few weeks. This one really wasn't in doubt for much of the game. And I know the Raiders scored on their opening drive to tie the football game. But after that, really the Broncos just controlled the game. And I think they just kind of they choked the life out of the Raiders in terms of how they played this football game in a lot of different ways, in terms of especially the time of possession, just nearly doubling up the Raiders from that standpoint, getting back to running the football as well as they did on Sunday was really important. Defensively, had the early drive, which we heard Jaquan McMillan talk about. They had a good 15, a good script planned out. But then after that, until garbage time, essentially, the Broncos, I think they gave up 8 total yards in the next 4 or 5 drives after the Raiders' opening touchdown drive. So just dominant there. And it wasn't, from a points perspective, like the 45-point breakout, right? But Sean Payton talked about there's a way to win every game. And this game, the plan was clearly, he said it was the antithesis of what they did last time, and he talked about he really didn't like the Broncos' offensive plan against the Raiders on Thursday Night Football. This was a completely different plan, and the Broncos played ball control. They controlled the clock. They moved the ball down the field. They converted a bunch of their third downs. I think they started 7 of 9 on third down before finishing 7 of 12. But this was a game where they just kind of they took the air out of the ball. And against a Pete Carroll defense, you got to sometimes take the underneath plays. They did that. They made opportune plays and special teams. And this was just one of those games where, and I know it ended up one possession game, because of course it did. And it's now Broncos now 9-2 in one-score games. But this is one of those where it's a one-score game in name only, right? And the Broncos were on the wrong side of that a couple times last year. I thought the Chargers loss and the maybe even the Pittsburgh loss. Those were kind of one-score games in name only. This was a one-score win in name only. The Broncos dominated this game. They showed they were the better team, and they played like they were the better team in all three phases. And there's going to be games where you're going to have to score more points, I think, and maybe push the ball a little bit more, be a little more daring defensively, make a few more turnover-worthy plays. But in this game, to beat this team, this is what you needed to do. And the Broncos executed that plan to perfection. And Sean Payton said Monday he really liked the plan and really liked the way the game unfolded. So this, in the NFL, and again, we say it every week, every team, and I heard it on some national preview shows, every team tends to have one sort of clunker during the season. And the Broncos, knock on wood, have not had, and it tends to come against a team that's struggling too. And the Broncos have not had a clunker that's led to a loss. And, even if they lose in this final 4-game stretch, these are good football teams they're playing. So it doesn't really fall under that category. But you think about just games that the Broncos should win, really should win. The last couple of years, they haven't dropped one of those, and especially this year, they haven't had one where you just look back and you're like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Really, the last one was Christmas Eve against New England a couple of years ago, and obviously that led to change. And since then, Broncos have taken care of business in big spots, and it's no coincidence that Bo Nix is now on a list of starting quarterbacks with the longest win streaks in Broncos history, right up there with John Elway and Peyton Manning. The way he's been able to, and we'll talk more about Bo, I'm sure, but game manage in a positive way was a really big deal. But yeah, nice to have a stress-free win, nothing to worry about. And it was just like no wins come easy in the NFL, but this one kind of did. And so that's a big deal, and it gets you to 11-2. It clinches the tiebreaker against New England. It puts you a win away, potentially from clinching the division, depending on what the Chargers do tonight and this weekend. But it was the atmosphere in the locker room was kind of interesting because it was almost like there was still smoke and there was still music and all that, and guys were still excited. But it was half of, hey, we got to finish that out better.
Yeah.
And also, it was just kind of like, okay, we're supposed to beat the Raiders. We beat the Raiders. On to the next one. It wasn't the jubilation of beating Kansas City or Philadelphia. It was almost just kind of like this workman-like, we needed to get the win. We got the win. What's next?
And what's next is going to be this matchup against the Packers, returning home where the Broncos are undefeated so far this season. And we're going to talk in depth about that matchup on Thursday's episode. But, it all starts with how the Broncos are able to control what they control. And getting a win on the road against the Raiders team that has been struggling and kind of had those ups and downs. It is kind of like serendipity, the fact that the Raiders just happened to beat the Patriots at the beginning of the year. And then you look back, and we've talked about this, how every game matters, because at that point, maybe you're like, oh, like it's not that big a deal. But then you could look at this point in the season, you're like, wow, that's a really huge game that can determine the AFC seeding. And this offense, this defense, we're going to talk about that, as well as just how the AFC picture is shaking out after week 14. But I think what impressed me the most about the offense was just, as you mentioned, the time of possession, the long drives. They had 19, 14, 10-play drives to really eat up the clock. You mentioned the run game that really got going, and RJ Harvey just continues to be that go-to guy. And for him to step up as a rookie when a veteran like J.K. Dobbins goes down, knowing the relationship that they have, they've constantly talked about how much they push each other and how much they want to play for each other. J.K., before he got injured, had mentioned, like, RJ just scratching the surface. I'm always pushing him and talking to him on ways that he can break tackles and get better. And you're kind of seeing that come into fruition. He had an 100-yard game. He had 75 yards rushing, 25 receiving. But he was kind of just all over the place. So when you compared it to Ashton Genty, who only had 30 yards rushing overall, the Broncos defense, only allowed 40 yards rushing on the day. That run game really played a big part, especially with two rookies going head to head. And they're tied, and they were tied in scrimmage yards, most scrimmage yards by a rookie. Scrimmage touchdowns, yes, and TDs with 8 each. So you kind of see them going head to head, and it was really fun to kind of watch them go at it and see how that played out on a division rival game.
Yeah, RJ Harvey, I thought Sean Payton put it well. He's had to grow up quickly because this was a rookie running back that I think had a lot of potential. You could see that from his college highlights. But it's a transition to come to the NFL and to take that next step and contribute for a playoff team, a championship caliber team, a team with really high goals. And especially when you talk about pass protection and being a 3-down back and all those sorts of things, it takes time to develop. And with J.K. Dobbins in the mix, you had that ability to kind of feature J.K. and mix R.J. Harvey in there. And when J.K. goes down, all of a sudden R.J. Harvey's put in a bigger role. He's featured more. And this game was a really good sign that he's up for that challenge. And it was the most touches he's had in a game this year. It was the most yards he's had in a game this year, 100 scrimmage yards. I thought he set the tone early on his second touch of the game. It was a kind of a pass out of the backfield, and he's hit immediately, and it looks like, the Broncos are going to get stopped on 3rd and short and have to punt on their first drive. Instead, he somehow doesn't go down and shakes off Jamal Adams, a 3-time Pro Bowler, gets the first down, and the Broncos end up scoring on that drive. They never trail. It's the first time this year the Broncos didn't trail in a game. So for him to do that and then also have the touchdown run and also contribute in protection and also catch the ball out of the backfield, all those things were good signs. And I think the one thing about the Broncos offense that even with wins over the Chiefs and wins over the Commanders that I think there were just questions about was, what does this run game look like without J.K. Dobbins? Because the Broncos were a top 5 rushing offense for a portion of the year. And then after Dobbins got hurt, those numbers went down a little bit against Kansas City, against the Commanders. They hadn't had a 100-yard rushing performance since Houston. And then I think 152 rushing yards. Yesterday was their most since Week 8 against Dallas. And it was like, this is the formula. And this is, and again, Sean Payton talks about each week there's a different plan. You might have to come out throwing this next week. if you get into kind of a scoring shootout with a team. But in January, in February, playoff football, especially if you're playing outdoors here in Denver or you end up in New England, running the ball, playing good defense matter. And Bo Nix, we've seen, especially the last 3 weeks, has played really well. I think he's raised his level of play and is playing quarterback at a high level. But if it's just him, it makes things tough on the offense. And when you can add in the element, the threat of a run game, which then opens up the play action and all sorts of other things, the deep shots down the field because you've got to play a little closer to the line of scrimmage if you're a defense. If you can have that balance with this defense that has played really well this season, that makes you a contender. It makes you a threat in the AFC and to win a championship. And without that, it's not like you can't do it because we see kind of one-dimensional teams find success.
Yeah.
But it makes it harder, right? And especially with a second-year quarterback, to have a run game you can count on really matters. And so I think in terms of yesterday, that was a really significant development to see the run game get going again, to have that sort of success. The Raiders know you're going to run it, and you still run it. You're still able to have success. And then the long drives. I think I saw a stat that the Broncos had scoring drives of 10 plays in at least 8 minutes. They had 3 of them. No team since at least 2000, I believe, has had that many drives, more such drives in a game. So it spoke to just kind of how the Broncos controlled that game. And think to, I'm just picking a random opponent, but Buffalo, for example. Mm-hmm. If you play against Buffalo in the postseason, and you can hold the ball for 10 minutes at a time, and you can keep Josh Allen off the field, keep your defense fresh when he's got to be on the field, and run the ball and control the clock that way, that feels like a path, right? And so, and again, it doesn't mean they'll do it every week. You got to have other ways to win. We've seen from the Broncos that in the fourth quarter, when they need it, when the game's on the line, Bo Nix can deliver those plays. In the 2-minute drill, he's been really good at that. But to have this sort of identity for the rest of the games, and it kind of dates back to Washington because last week I think there were 4 drives of at least 10 plays. All were scoring drives, I believe. There might have even been 5 drives of 10 plays. It's 2 weeks in a row now that you've seen this happen. And so that was a really encouraging sign from just an identity standpoint because the tough thing was they had that identity with J.K. Dobbins, and then he goes out and it's like, okay, we've got to reinvent ourselves a little bit. Mm-hmm. They found a way to kind of get back to what they were doing. And that's you talk about what matters from a game against a team with 2 wins. That sort of thing matters to me, at least. That's a good sign moving forward.
Yeah, RJ Harvey is the 6th rookie since 1990 with at least 5 rushing TDs and 4 receiving TDs. This offensive line has done such a great job, not only for creating those lanes for the rookie to run through them, but also protecting Bo Nix. And you hear from Garrett Bowles, you hear from Mike McGlinchey, and they talk about how much pride they take in that because Bo Nix is one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the NFL this season. And when you're going against, the Max Crosbys and the Micah Parsons and, soon many more that he's going to face, you see the elusiveness that he's able to create. And that's part of what adds to that balanced offense. When you have a good defense, a good run game, Bo kind of gets freed up to make other plays to his other playmakers because there's a lot on this team. One of them being Marvelous Mims. What do you say, Mile High Mims? Is that what his nickname is in the receivers? Mile High Marv. Mile High Mims. I like that rules. It's just all his nicknames are good. But he had his first career punt return for a touchdown and really showed why he's been a Pro Bowler, in his career, just the explosive that he's been able to have. And you go back to the games that he wasn't playing and you see how much of an impact he makes on the field. And for him to go out there and really set the tone, Bo Nix, after the game, when he was speaking to the media, he mentioned that ended up being the difference maker right there when he spoke to CBS after the game. And he also mentioned, this game isn't pretty. And we've said that phrase very often. But honestly, I don't care if the win is pretty or not as pretty. I'm not going to say ugly, but it's a win is a win. And when you have your special team step up on top of the run game, on top of the defense, and on top of your quarterback playing, smart, the Broncos are a really tough team to beat.
Yeah. Marvin, he's just such a difference maker and a threat on special teams. And he's obviously been in the Pro Bowl back-to-back years. He's been a all-pro back-to-back years from a return standpoint. He should have that again, right? He changed the game yesterday, but he's also changed many other games. The return against Kansas City earlier this year was a big moment. I think back to last year's game against the Colts where the Broncos were really struggling to get anything going. He has a big return that sets up the go-ahead touchdown. And he's also embraced the role, right? And as a third-year player who had success down the stretch last year on offense, you see receivers around the league. It can be a position where you're outspoken and want the ball. And for Marvin and we hear Sean Payton talk about this as an unselfish group, an unselfish team. I think that really applies to the receiver position where, hey, some weeks Cortland's going to get 6, 7, 8, 9 targets, and some weeks he's not going to get all those. And Troy Franklin and Evan Ingram and Marv and like Pat Bryant, all these guys, have had their moments and will have their moments. But I also really appreciate and can, think really highly of these guys for when they don't have that. It's about the team still, and obviously it helps when you're winning. Winning helps everything. But that said, for Marvin to really still embrace that role on special teams, that's a tough position. You get hit hard. Guys come after you. He said on the kickoff return that he got blasted pretty good, and didn't want that to happen again on the punt return, and so instead he just runs away from everybody and scores a touchdown. But one thing that is worth noting is Sean Payton said Monday that the team is looking at ways to get Marvin more touches on offense, and we see from time to time there's the pass. Probably not as many deep shots this year to Marv as we've seen in at the end of last year, but again, hopefully for the Broncos, you've still got 7 games left if you get the first round bye. You hope that this is still a lengthy stretch, and so still plenty of time for Marv to contribute. But I really do think in a postseason game, when the game's on the line, a tough game, hard fought, your defense is playing well, a punt return like that from Marvin Mims, even 15, 20, 30 yards of field position can change the game. We've seen Marvin do it before, and yesterday was no different. But as the Broncos continue this year, they might be locked in a close playoff game, and a Marvin Mims return could be the difference and be the reason why the Broncos win a football game. So what a luxury to have a guy like that. And Sean Payton said from the very beginning, special teams is a place you can improve quickly. That and the offensive line, and it helps your team get better. Marvin became Sean Payton's first draft pick. He and George Payton selected him right when Sean Payton got here. And I remember him saying back then that Marvin Mims' speed is like there's nobody on the highway and you can just drive. And you saw it yesterday when he got to the edge. He was just gone. And so, credit to Marvin, and he's another weapon for this team.
He definitely is. And I think you nailed it when you said that this team is very unselfish, because as they're asking Marvin post-game about his first career punt return for a touchdown, the first thing he wants to do is brag about his teammates. And he spoke about J.L. Skinner, and he's like, he had a really big hit. And like every time I do my special teams return, he's always the guy that I look, and he just happens to be there, clearing the lane for me. And I think that's a big part, because you see Marvin running, you see him pointing at the defenders, and his guys are just on it. They're very much in sync. PJ Locke also in there, just kind of doing the most. And that's part of it, right? It's the unselfishness of this team to embrace whatever role needs to be done in order for this team to be at where they are right now, which is at 11-2. And so you can't downplay those teams. And we've talked about it from contract negotiations to just touches or whatever. There's no drama in this locker room, because the goal is to win, the goal is to play for each other, and the goal is everyone collectively has made an impact, whether it comes up on the stat sheet or not. And a big part of this that we talked about last week with like Huff and his impact, or Devin Key and his impact on special teams. Like, these are the unsung heroes sometimes that this team continues to just brag about. So I took a lot from that when, it's Marvin's special moment and such a milestone in his career. And he's like, yeah, but let's talk about my guys really quick. I think that plays a big part. And I think that camaraderie trickles over to the defense, and they had another great performance against the Raiders.
Yeah, they did. I think without the first drive notwithstanding, for them to come back and buckle down and play the way they did, sacking Geno 3 times. Nick Bonito gets a second when he gets to Kenny Pickett. It looked like, it's oversimplistic to some degree, but like it looked like it should against an offense that has struggled. And you've got Brock Bowers, who caught a touchdown, but other than that, you didn't let him hurt you in the same way that he's hurt some other teams. Ashton Gent, like we said, didn't get going. The Raiders had just 40 rushing yards, I believe. So the defense did what they were supposed to do. Obviously, you got to clean things up at the end. But there's an element, I think, of like human nature probably that you let up a little bit. And it may be a good lesson for the Broncos to learn that these games can get, as they should know from themselves from the other side, like these games can get close quickly. And when you're playing teams like the Packers, like the Jaguars, Chiefs, Chargers down the stretch, you can't have those let up moments if you're up late in the game. So it's a good lesson, and always better to learn those lessons after wins when they don't hurt you the same way. But yeah, I mean, defensively, the front played really well. And I think that's an area where Denver, if they go on a run here, it's going to be because of how they play at the line of scrimmage, both on offense and defensively, just getting after the quarterback. Another 4 sacks, and I think they're only the second team since 2000, I believe, with this many sacks in the first 14 games or 13 games.
It's like every week there's like this stat from 19 whatever to show like just how amazing this defense is. And you mentioned it on the pod a couple of weeks ago, where you said like, it's almost like, they lead in sacks, they lead in QB hits, but it's like you look how much they're leading in sacks and how much they're leading in QB hits. And not that you take it for granted, but it's like it's the expectation of what this defense is capable of. And everything that you mentioned that they did, I think it's a good bounce back game from what they had against Washington, where they all kind of held each other accountable of like, the bye week was great. We didn't perform exactly how I wanted to, but we're going to answer back. And that's how you answer back.
Yeah, it's going to be a different challenge. We'll talk about it this week, but Jordan Love, the receivers that they have over there, there may not be like the star number one receiver, but they've got a lot of guys that can hurt you and can attack, and a good run game with Josh Jacobs. And this will be as big a challenge in terms of facing an offense as they've seen all year, in my opinion. And so it's a different challenge, but all you can do is attack the challenge that's in front of you. And so to have the success they did against the Raiders and really put things, out of reach. Yeah. And that was one of the things that stood out is they didn't let them hang around. Late in the half, the Broncos go for a 4th down to try to add points and push it to 17-7 at halftime. Troy Franklin kind of has the pass, but it's bobbled a little bit, so they don't get the 1st down. And really, the Raiders have a chance there to score if they can just get 15, 20 yards to attempt a field goal. And instead, the defense makes a big hold. I believe after halftime, they come and they go 3 and out right after the intermission, And then when the Broncos get the ball back, after that 3 and out, so the next time they touch the ball, they go 14 plays, 91 yards, more than a 9-minute drive, and that makes it 21-7, and it's pretty much done at that point. So just a really good, solid defensive performance and really all-around team performance. I think the one guy we haven't really talked about is Bo. In terms of what he did.
I was going to bring him up next because he mentioned the importance of those long drives, and he talked about it post-game as well, just saying, like, that's what you want to do, and you want to have your defense rest. And he even mentioned, he's like, our defense has been on the field a lot this season, and so when you're able to pull these long drives together and score some points, that's how you're able to really just exhaust the other team, like exhaust the other defense to really take advantage, as you mentioned, put the game away. But the way he's been able to do over the last few games, I mean, we've talked about it. We've heard, the outside noise of his play, but he is so calm, cool, and collective. And regardless if it's a 2-12 team or it's another team that's, 11-2 or whatever it is that you're facing, he always has this calmness about him. And I know the guys in the locker room always talk about it and the fact that they just trust. And before it was like, we believe we can win. Now it's more like we believe we will win. And that takes time, and that comes from the leadership of Bo and what he's able to do, in the huddle as they're kind of going down to score.
Yeah, I thought yesterday, and he was asked about the concept of being a game manager, right? That sometimes you're going to have to make those big time plays, but other times you take what the defense is going to give you, and Bo did that yesterday to a high degree of success. He was 31 of 38. That's the 3rd highest completion percentage of his career. It's more than 81.6 to be exact. They're the most completions, I believe, of his career. And when you have that sort of performance, and really it could have been even better because there were a couple of drops mixed in there. It's like, what in a game like that in particular, where you're controlling the clock and controlling the ball, what more do you want from your quarterback? And Bo mentioned, hey, we want to find some explosive plays and mix those chunk plays in. But if he plays, again, we've talked about it the last 3 weeks, right, where it's like, if he plays like that, Broncos have a chance to go on a real run here.
Yeah.
And I think it's like what you expect, right? And Sean Payton talks about a quarterback in year 2. You see that development. You see that growth. You point to any of the fourth quarter comebacks this year, the way he's played in the 2-minute drill, the last 2 minutes have been really impressive. He had a no-look pass on Sunday where he kind of like made the linebacker move to his right with his eyes and then knew he had the receiver coming back behind him. And it's like, that's a veteran type move. And so I thought Bo was impressive. Obviously had the rushing TD. He's the only quarterback, I believe, franchise history to have back-to-back seasons with at least 4 rushing touchdowns. I think he moved into 3rd, maybe 2nd overall in terms of overall rushing touchdowns in franchise history. But I think the biggest thing is he just wins. And we talked about that stat on Thursday about like the other quarterbacks who have had their most wins in the first 2 seasons of their career.
Yeah.
Bo's now tied for 5th. His next win will tie him for 2nd with Ben Roethlisberger, Andrew Luck, Dak Prescott.
Wow.
And there's still a chance that, if the Broncos can win out, that nobody in their first 2 seasons since 1950 has more wins than Bo. So, like, he's a guy that just finds a way to win.
Numbers don't lie, people.
Yeah, and I know that QB wins, people are don't love that stat, but but he finds a way. And the way he spread the ball around was really impressive. I think 11 different receivers or pass catchers caught passes. Only Mercedes Lewis didn't end up with one. And Sean Payton was told that stat post-game, and he kind of like paused and said, like, 11? And he was told, yeah. And he was like, I don't know if he was trying to like think of all the guys on the team. Like, he was trying to like get to 11. But yeah, that was impressive. I also thought the way he looked for Courtland Sutton after a stretch where teams have really focused on limiting Sutton early and often in big moments. He went to Sutton, who ended up with 6 catches for 62 yards, which I have to pull it up, but I'd imagine that is Sutton's probably most significant line in a few weeks, if I had to guess.
Well, why are you doing that? Let's see.
Oh, well.
What?
I'm not smart. He had 62 yards exactly the week before, too. That's kind of crazy.
You know what? The last 2 weeks have kind of been a blur. But as you mentioned, all the receivers
felt like more.
he's been able to connect to. I mean, you just go down the line. You have Marvin, you have Tyler Bidet, Evan Ingram, Jaleel McLaughlin, Troy Franklin, Adam Prentice, Adam Troutman, RJ Harvey, Little Jordan Humphrey, Pat Bryant, Courtland Sutton. But I think aside from the fact that Bo can find his playmakers, attack you with his legs, he is a dual threat in that way. He showed that since week 1 of his rookie season. I think it's the distribution that he has across all his playmakers and the fact that he tries to be in sync with all of them. And I think you kind of see that develop over the course of the season, over the course of last year with Courtland Sutton in particular. But I think that's what we talked about earlier with RJ Harvey. And, Pat Bryant has had some really good catches over the last few weeks and seeing him get going. So I think like when you have so many options to kind of extend drives and use your different weapons to really attack a Raiders defense that really was trying to get after you, I think is really key. And because you improved to 5-2 on the road, which is, not easy to do. And that was like the other part of this, right? You have Bo that is standing at 11-2, and then you have the guys like Pat Surtain that has been here when they weren't playing as well. And he mentioned like, look, like we stuck through it and now this is where we are. And so to get to that milestone for Bo, I think it's huge. Like, given all the criticism, the way he's handled it, the way that he's gone out there to play and finish games. Again, people can talk all they want, but when you have a quarterback, as you mentioned, that can go out there and finish the game, there's nothing much more to say after that. It's just like he's doing what he needs to do, and his playmakers are where they need to be to make plays.
Yeah, and this is a team now that has an opportunity, and each win you get pushes you a little bit closer, and you get that tie break against New England and really secure your positioning if you end up going head to head. But you now get to a stretch, 4 games left. All 4 of these games are going to be difficult games, huge games. They all feel like toss-ups.
Yeah.
I think the Broncos are going to be in every single one, but you got to find a way to close some of these out. And it'll be interesting to see, internally, like Sean Payton talked about, the players, they're focused on what they've got to do. Beating Green Bay, a plan for Green Bay. But for us and for fans, you can look around the league and say, okay, well, what is New England going to do? They've got a big one against Buffalo.
Huge.
Is there a way that Buffalo can beat New England and give the Broncos a little bit of breathing room there? Does Baltimore get New England the next week in Baltimore? Those are the types of things where do the Broncos get a little leeway in the race for the 1 seed, or are they going to have to go 4-0, 3-1 in this stretch to secure home field advantage, to secure that first-round bye that's going to be so valuable? And worth reiterating that Sean Payton said you don't have to get that to win, but it's helpful, and certainly
it's very helpful.
They're chasing that. They're working toward that, but as early as this weekend can clinch a playoff berth, can clinch the division, depending on, again, what happens tonight and on Sunday between the Chiefs and Chargers. But since January, and I'm sure that before that it was talked about too internally of, hey, everything goes through Kansas City, and we've got to beat them to get to where we want to go. But really at the end of last year, it started to become more of hey, the outspoken goal, and Greg Penner said this, George Payton, Sean Payton, at the end of season press conference the day after, or a couple days after the Buffalo loss, our goal is to win the AFC West. And you are now, it's not a sure thing. It's not clinched yet, but you got a 91% chance. You are right there, and it's an opportunity to go grab it and take it and, earn the hat, as they say, right? And get that AFC West champion swag for the first time in a decade. But you got to find a way to do that. But that then puts you in such good position. You get the home playoff game that Sean Payton said you need. If you play well enough down the stretch, you potentially get the first round bye. And as you kind of look at the rest of the schedule and what other teams are doing, you can start to pay attention to which teams could we potentially face in the playoffs, depending on how some of these matchups shake out. What do we need to do to get that seed? And we talk about New England, Jacksonville in a couple weeks is going to be wanting to beat Denver to improve their own seeding and get up there. So these are important games, and the more that you win, the more you put yourself in position for the important games and play in bigger games. And, I think we've seen so far from the Broncos that they're up for it, and excited to see how this stretch kind of finishes out.
Yeah, recapping action from around the AFC, the Colts lost 36-19. Daniel Jones is out for the season. Jacksonville now sits atop the AFC South. They played the Jets week 15. It's their 4th straight win for Jacksonville to improve to 9-4. The Pats obviously on their bye week. They play the Bills in week 15. The Bills just defeated the Bengals in a close game, 39-34. And the reason why all these things are important, because where it stands around, the next 2 opponents that the Broncos face are currently sitting at top of their divisions. You have the Packers, who are atop the NFC North after defeating the Bears. You have Jacksonville that's on top after defeating the Colts. And then you have the Texans, who went out and really dominated the Chiefs, which goes back to what I think our post Dub Day podcast episode after that Texans win, where you mentioned, and we mentioned, that game is going to be very impressive as you kind of go down. It's getting more and more impressive when you see just how well that Texans defense is playing and the way they just dominated Patrick Mahomes in that game. So for Bo to have the game that he had against the Texans, again, shows that dynamic that they're able to create, because the Texans defeating the Chiefs, they're eliminated from AFC West contention. So the AFC West will have a new team to crown, and that'll be the first time since 2015. And as you mentioned, all eyes will be on Monday Night Football for the Eagles versus Chargers. So I think you look at just how the AFC continues to go up and down, up and down, up and down, but the Broncos have stayed consistent through that storm, and I think as you get into the last few games where you're going to have a tough Packers team, a tough Jacksonville team, a tough Christmas game on the road in Kansas City and then closing it out at home against the Chargers, you don't know what that last game is going to mean. But I know that when I look back at some of the wins that at the time people thought like, oh, well, they struggled here, struggled there, they still won. And when you look at the magnitude of what these teams are doing now late in the season, it's starting to kind of show how well the Broncos have really figured it out, played complementary football, and been sticking together throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I mean, now that we have like some comparison points from that Houston game, Bo in that game, 18 of 37, so a 48.6 completion percentage, which obviously is low, right? It's his lowest of the year. 173 yards, which I believe were his fewest or second fewest of the season, an interception, but he did have 2 touchdown passes, and he only took 1 sack. And he also had that key fourth quarter rush, right, that set up the game-winning field goal. Also had the presence of mind to get it to RJ Harvey, pressure coming, a beautiful throw to Cortland Sutton. Like, you go back and you look at like what he did in that game, and you're like, that looks impressive. Because then you look at Mahomes yesterday, for example, 14 of 33, so fewer completions, 42.4 completion percentage, lower completion percentage, 160 yards, fewer yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Obviously, that's worse. And then, well, I was trying to think of another word, but it just is, like, statistically.
Hashtag analysis.
And Bo had a 68.9 quarterback rating. Mahomes's was 19.8 with 2 sacks to Bo's 1 sack. And even Josh Allen, who really, like, when you look at it, actually played, he threw it for 253 yards, completed 70% of his passes, but he threw 2 interceptions, and he was sacked 8 times, and ended up with a 67.4 quarterback rating, which was, again, worse than Bo's. And so it's not. I'm not saying that like Bo is a better quarterback than Josh or Mahomes, and obviously those guys have accomplished a lot. Allen's an MVP. Mahomes, obviously, we know what he's done in this league.
But Bo is also in his second year.
Right, but Bo took a lot of heat after that game of like, oh, the Broncos defense like carried them in this game. And it's like, well, yes, part of having a complete team is that you want both sides, or really all three. You
help each other.
Yeah, you want all 3 phases of the game to help each other. But Bo made plays in that game, and whether it was I think it was the 3rd down touchdown pass to Cortland Sutton, or the throw to RJ Harvey, or again the run, like 3 very vivid plays that I remember that changed the outcome of the football game. Like in the postseason, if you're playing a defense like that, you've got to be able to make those plays. And Bo did that, and just like at least in those 2 matchups, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes were not able to make those plays. And so if you have guys like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes struggling, it makes like what you saw from Bo Nix even more impressive. And so I know that Bo is, and like people online for whatever reason, like don't want to give him credit, but the more you like see that Houston defense play, we talked about going in because at the time Houston was, let's see, I think they were 3-4, if I remember. Yeah, 3-4. And I remember I was like, this is not a 3-4 team. It's not a cakewalk game. This is like
you stressed that. I remember.
This is not a you should win game. This is a tough battle. And the Broncos, if you remember, like they didn't even play that well. They had a lot of mistakes. They had the muff punt, a couple other mistakes, and yet they found a way to win. And now it's a team that's on this, I think, 5-game winning streak. Just it gives you a little more perspective. And if there's one thing the Broncos will get to do over the final stretch, it's prove themselves against these teams because, like you said, the Packers, really good. Jaguars at the top of the AFC South. The Chiefs at home, that's no joke either. And so they're gonna have a chance to show it. And I think, if I haven't said this already, this will be good prep for the postseason, just in terms of like, this is going to feel like playoff type football against playoff caliber teams. And I don't want to say the stakes aren't high because you're looking for that home field advantage and you're looking to find a way to win and secure that top seed, but it's not one and done necessarily. So it gives you I think this more experience of playing in these tough games, these probably nail-biter games without the one-and-done penalty, if you will. So excited to see what that looks like. Excited to get into it on Thursday and talk all about the Packers, because this will be a fun game, and it's going to be probably the toughest game the Broncos have played all year. Even though it's at home, like, it's right up there with the Philly game. It's right up there with the Kansas City game. This is a really good Packers team. So excited to break all that down.
You mentioned it about how this is preparing them for the postseason. I think it's a good test to them to understand, like, whether it's on the road or at home, we can hold our own against the best teams in the NFL, and we can go after them and really kind of find their weakness and take advantage of it to get the win. And as you mentioned, like, the next stretch is not going to be easy. We've talked about it all season. The AFC in general is just it's really tough. The NFC too. I mean, a couple losses, next thing you know, you went from leading your division to now being in the hunt. And so it's like, or in the wild card spot. And so it's constantly moving. But the consistency that the Broncos have been able to create for themselves is really key as you kind of look at the playoff picture. And I know that that's not here yet. You have to still a few games left. But it's really exciting because, December football is when things get real and you start understanding, like, as you mentioned, where the Broncos are and where they want to go. And winning the division is a goal of theirs, and it is something that, they've all talked about. Evan Ingram mentioned it going into this matchup, that is one of the goals, winning the division, because that's going to help you get to where you need to be. And I think it sets the tone of what the Broncos have been building here over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I hope that, and we will Thursday, if you're a Broncos fan, you're cheering for the Eagles tonight. You're hoping that the Chargers lose one and drop another game back, which would put them 3 games back with 4 weeks to play, and push the Broncos. I think the Broncos playoff odds are or AFC West odds are like 96%.
Yeah.
If the Eagles win tonight. So in either way, they stay in the high 80s, even with the Chargers win. But, we could be talking about Thursday, like, here are the 2 things that need to happen for the Broncos to win a division title. And so excited to these are the fun games to talk about, right? And I saw it, we'll get into comments on Thursday, but I saw a comment that was like, hey, I've been listening for a long time, and they were like, I'm glad Aric gets to cover some wins. And like,
you're like, me too.
Well, it's like, I obviously feel very lucky to do what I do for a living and like get to watch football and cover football for a living. But that said, like, there's extra excitement and there's something special when you are covering a team like this. And not that those other seasons don't have value in their own way, but like, this is more fun than a 5-11 season, right? Like, there's just there's no doubting that. So excited to see this final month and get ready for the playoffs.
Well, I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the Cortland Suttons and the Garrett Bulls and the Patrick Chans and just everyone that's really kind of been here creating what this is now and buying into it. And I too feel lucky to be a part of this amazing run that the Broncos have been able to put together. I know Broncos country, you are too. I'm saying, you just need a little magic, and the Broncos have definitely been able to produce that. Standing at 11-2, the Broncos will return home to Empower Field at Mile High, and yeah, I can't wait for that matchup. I'm looking at stats. Yesterday when I was looking over the game, I was just like, this is where, as you mentioned, it gets real. And Broncos country, make sure you guys leave your comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends about this podcast. We're excited to see what you guys have, the pulse of Broncos country as we read them on Thursday's episode, and we'll get you ready for that Week 15 matchup against the Green Bay Packers. The Broncos looking to extend their winning streak to 11 games and extend their home winning streak to stay undefeated this season. So stay tuned on Altitude Advantage on the Broncos YouTube channel.